Ah, greetings, this is Kal Kat, the Kal Katster. And there is a recent Star Trek series rumor I thought I would quelch immediately. There's another one. Another rumor, a show called Star Trek United. I'm going to put this just little snippet up on the channel. We're in the middle of doing the 2 of our fan films for the season, and I just thought I would chime in on this. A little over 20 years ago, Star Trek Enterprise ended, and apparently Robert Sussman wants to make more of them. He made roughly 20 episodes of the show. Scott Bakula wants to be back again. Is he the Quantum Leap guy? Is he actually Sam? He leapt into Captain Archer. The original ending that we had was at least they had the speech. But they didn't even show the speech in the original ending. The Space the Fall Frontier speech should have been in there, and Trip Tucker should not have died. But we've been over the finale of Enterprise before. There's no reason to go back there. But there were 2 major points that Trip shouldn't have died. It was stupid. And they should have had the speech. And then that would have been okay. I wrote the speech. They just didn't film it. Anyway, so I know this other thing. There are rumors going all over the net today. Yesterday and today. Mostly today. There's a new Star Trek. He's going to be the space president. There's articles everywhere. Well, actually, it goes back to Cinema Blend, and it goes back to a Trek movie. They're fan sites. They are aggregate fan sites. They're legitimate, but they're aggregate fan sites. And if you read the entire article on those 2 websites, they say this could have happened, and it didn't. That the bad robot people passed on it. That the current administration changing over to Skydance passed on it and said, no, we're not doing that. Strange New Worlds having a cameo by Archer wouldn't make sense unless there was a... So Sussman pitched the story because he's a producer on Star Trek, and Paramount said no. So they have said no, it's not going to happen. But an idea of them playing a message, maybe that speech from Captain Archer would be fun. But the story premise they had was that somehow Archer is still around in the time of Strange New Worlds, which he wouldn't be. He'd be gone because he'd be over 140 years old. Or their idea was, he's a space president. Well, that's dumb. Don't do politics in Star Trek. It never works. Now, when we did it, spoofing it in ours, we usually make the space president the bad guy so that he can show up and get humiliated. That's the way to do it. No, Archer's a legendary character. He shouldn't. No, he can't. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Scott Bakula's character was very similar in mannerisms to then President Bush. In some mannerisms, in some ways. Well, clearly smarter than Bush back in the day. And they were kind of doing an off spoof. I get where they're getting it from, because that was the case. They were like, let's make a Bush-like captain, who's the captain of the ship. That's what they were doing with Enterprise. But then they made a night in sickbay, which should not be discussed. They also have some horror ones. Yeah, so scary. So yeah. Basically, the story's not true. The rumors are not true. No, it's a bad idea. They were comparing their article. The person was of the opinion, in their opinion piece in their article, Cinema Blend and the other one, that the idea was that Archer would play like in the West Wing or something, in like it'd be a wacky space president. That's another thing that's kind of wrong with it, is like that wouldn't be interesting. So yeah, Archer story is not true. I was going to go off on a tangent on that. Why should I do that? I'm going to cut it out anyway. Why would they bring it back? The show was canceled. It had a bad finale. Why on earth would they beat it again? Because 20 years later, it would be 2181, and that's an era of Star Trek we haven't seen. It would be 20 years later, and we don't need that unless that's the prequel movie they're doing. But no, it's not. The prequel movie different, which they should throw away as well, because we don't need another origin story. We don't need a Star Trek story where everything is less advanced, because they always screw it up. Discovery being an example. The Abrams Trek being an example. It was too advanced and too weird, and Kirk was immediately a captain. It's like, no, that's not what happened. At least Strange New Worlds kind of fixes that. And says, well, that's not what did happen. I know it's a multiverse, so so it's fine. So, this is Kal Kat, the Kal Katster. And I'm going to do, this is a add-on to the Star Trek United Archer rumor story thread that is going all over the internet. The original footage of that went viral as of Star Trek Las Vegas, roughly during this report, basically. I want to update that. I also wanted to trim out all of the fluff related to the fan film that had nothing to do with it. So I did, and I'm reposting this. It's been a week since the news of that dropped, and so I'm going to chime in right now, sticking to the facts as a reporting student from years ago. Sticking to the facts. Okay, yes. Since then, the channel Jesse Gender After Dark aired some mention of it since then, and the other channels, 2 other channels covered it. I'm gonna repost mine because it's sort of a response to that. If you actually, so what happened apparently is a year ago, roughly a year ago, yeah, the other Las Vegas convention, Bakula and Sussman were there, and they talked about this, and they were going to go pitch it. So it was kind of like the Gamilt pitch in 2015, which didn't happen because he wasn't a fan. He wasn't famous. There's no rules for unsolicited scripts at Star Trek. You cannot submit scripts to Star Trek if you're not in the know. So, in this case, Bob Sussman and Scott Bakula are in the know. So, oh yeah, they could totally go and pitch. But it's the same deal in the sense that, well, they're in the know, but they haven't been involved in Star Trek for almost 30 years. So, no. They're not. No. So that's another thing to add to that out there. So if you watch the full video of what they were interviewed saying, they had a premise before they went out there and said it. It's kind of like how at GalaxyCon we had a bunch of TNG guys last year, and they talked about, we're not going this year because of Disneyland, but the Disneyland is weeks away, and so we didn't go to VegasCon either. You can't find video footage of this Vegas con that they mention showing the 2 of them saying this. It's all transcripted from their speech, and apparently in their speech they had a caveat in there. None of these trades, even Screen Crush, none of them read apparently the caveat. We can talk about this premise we had because they passed on it, because they said at Paramount, Skydance, we're changing hands. Skydance is going to buy us out, and we don't want any new pitches yet. We want to make sure that we want to see where Star Trek is going and maybe change some things, move things around. And we don't know. I'm not there. I'm quoting obviously I'm not. Yeah, but let's make that clear that I'm not. I'm a fan. I'm a super fan. Star Trek super fan, like Gamal was. Star Trek super fan. And I don't work for Paramount. I don't work for CBS. Don't work for Skydance. It's kind of weird that the Skydance thing is similar, in that they've been similar for 40 years. They've been similar to our stuff, and it's really eerie. And that's what I was getting at with that rambly little thing in there. And I cut out the rambly stuff. Yes, we have fan films. Yes, we do that. Yes, our stuff is similar. But no, we are not in the know at Star Trek. If we were, you would see our names in print on Star Trek. You would see, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. Whole 9 yards referring to a World War II expression. The whole 9 yards of your ammo coming out of your plane, fighter plane. That's where that comes from. Yeah. Anyway, no, we were not involved in the Trek thing. This site, but maybe Robert Burnett thinks over there at formerly of Axonar. Nope, we are not involved in Star Trek. We can't hire you either. It would be the other way around. You were a producer over there, Burnett was. So he would hire us. Be the other way around. No. Anyway, so, yeah. Rob Sussman was a writer and producer on Star Trek Enterprise. And Bakula was, of course, the main star. The only reason that I think this came out viral is because Tawny Newson was also a writer and star on Lord X. Well, she got to pitch, so they let him do it. That's not what happened. Okay, that's not what happened. Tawny Newson, the Newsons know they have connections. That family knows Hollywood. They have connections. That's how they got her in there. That's how they got her the story. So they have connections. I don't have any connections. Tell me exactly. And it's kind of similar to how Bob Picardo last year at the convention, the local GalaxyCon, or our local convention, said, which moved over from, it was originally Florida, but they moved up to San Jose just to do a San Jose one. Now they're doing San Jose ones. They were different group than Creation, which we did back in the day, Creation Cons. It's just called that. It had nothing to do with creationism at all. It was just called that. And they were back in the day. And we were, involved in that. The conventions back in the day that are no longer being held. I think the Star Trek Las Vegas is the last holdout. But anyway, so we have, we went to them. Yeah, let's make that clear. Let's make all that clear. Went to them. Super fan. Star Trek, super. But yeah, the Rob Ricardo said last year he's got a project coming on, and he can't really talk about it because it's an NDA. Therein lies another way to debunk said rumor. If there was a show in production that was going to be Scott Bakula in it, centered stuff, he couldn't talk about it. He would not be allowed to talk about it. It would be an NDA. They would say, no, you can't talk about this until it's actually in production and there's footage and you can talk about it. That would absolutely be that. No. So there isn't a production going on. They said, oh, well, we've talked about it, so there must be. Read the whole article. The article says, no, this is something they passed on, something they're not going to do, something they did not greenlight. If they decide to greenlight it 6 months from now and decide to do it, that doesn't mean that the rumors were debunked. That means that they changed their minds. So if it does happen, then they change their minds. I don't think they're going to, because there are several things. I know there's a bunch of fans on Jesse Ginger's site that would love to do a political thriller or LGBTQ plus thriller as well. That'd be great to do an LGBTQ plus thriller. That'd be awesome. But I don't think Star Trek is ready for that. Not with their current administration changing hands, and not with their kind of going back to how it was back in the DS9 days, where they're like, no, Garrick can't be homosexual. No. Bashir has to have a girlfriend, and Dax has to have a boyfriend. He has to have the most masculine Klingon on the ship. They get set up. What? Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff. The original Next Generation with LaForge, he was clearly supposed to be homosexual. But then they changed it the second season on. So he has daughters now and stuff. So yeah, so they're very skittish about that, even though they've included some trans characters, and that's awesome. But they didn't do much with them, as David Gerald complained at one of the conventions. He was like, they complained about the LGBT character representation being a little off. Even Dal and Gray are technically acting as a boy and girlfriend. They're trans, but they're acting as a boy. They're acting straight. Why are they acting straight? And then they couldn't do anything with it, so they're all, let's send him away to the Trill planet or what. It's like, you guys couldn't even do anything with that. And I don't mind parts of Academy having weird hybrid aliens and having, that weird Klingon Tellarite guy that one guy playing. I don't mind that, because then as someone commented in one of the comments, not get enough blood wine to a Klingon, he'll do it with anything. Also, the same thing with the Jem'Hadar Klingon lady. It's like, sure, maybe in the future they made one. The Klingons made one. But why not? They're clone aliens. Sure. That's fine. The only drawback to an Academy story is it's 90210. Is it's throwback to that kind of thing. That's the only thing that messes that up. Which was in the rant originally, and I just thought that's kind of what messes that up. And what's weird is it's been, the Academy idea has been floating around since 1988. Star Trek V was originally going to be an Academy, but they changed it to be Kirk finding space god. That wasn't really a god. Yes, way back to when I was actually in high school, the 80s. But yes, yeah, so, yeah, this is back of the thing. Wouldn't really work either, as I kind of tried to say in the comments. It wouldn't work, the Bacula thing, because you can't do it. In the current, I commented this, I will quote myself. In the current political diaspora, that is that Star Trek will reflect either the utopia, the dystopia, or the diaspora, the current diaspora, and the current other stuff going on. They're not going to tread any water. They're not going to make any. They're not going to muddy the waters. They're not going to do all kinds of metaphors. They're not going to mess with that. They're just not going to. It's certainly under Skydance, which is a little more conservative, unfortunately. Darn you, Skydance. No, but you can still hire us. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. If there was a political diaspora, you cannot do a political thriller Star Trek story. It just would absolutely be boring, and at times depressing. Nobody wants to see boring and depressing. What we want to see is a fun crew going on a fun adventure, and it doesn't matter that two of them are gay. That's what I want to see. It doesn't matter. They happen to be, whatever. Or they're, the crew is actually a bunch of working class kind of guys, like Lower Decks kind of did. And they're just out there in space. It happens to be set in the Star Trek universe, but they're doing a space adventure, and they're not the best and the brightest. They're kind of incompetent almost, some of them. They're just kind of messing things up. Lower Decks did that brilliantly. I know it's a long ride about that. Yeah, it's kind of what Enterprise was trying to do, but it was still a prequel. Enterprise was a prequel. The other one's a prequel. I don't think the idea of doing... Why do they keep trying to do Kirk and Spock and every crew again? Why do they keep doing that? And yeah, the season of the show, this season of Strange New Worlds has been kind of a mess. A hit and miss. They're kind of trying to be more like Lower Decks, which is funny, inadvertently being more like my fan films. But I think the reason that they're being like the fan films is because they're trying to be sillier. Case in point, they use telephones to talk to each other in the last episode. It's like, what? Okay, you're just being silly at this point. And I don't know if that really works so much. I don't mind some of the characters. Some of them work. But you're just being silly. If you're intending to be silly in the middle of a crisis situation, that's another reason it's kind of screwing. It's Alex Kurtzman. I mean, he's not a serious guy. He just isn't. Well, it's a good thing Orky's not involved anymore, and J.J. Abrams isn't directly involved anymore. But yeah, didn't mind Picard season 3. I just asked Terry Metalis, please put the lighting up a little bit. Can't see what's going on. It's too dark. Why is it dark? Doesn't it literally be dark? And the other complaint about Strange New Worlds is, blocking scenes and putting the characters in the scene and the line of sight. You're in a line of sight thing. I'm doing that right here on purpose. It's a line of sight, and you have to have your characters, framed. And a political thriller would just be a mess, like The West Wing. Really, a comedy politics show. How would that even work? That just wouldn't work. It doesn't make sense. Yes, and they need to stop with the whispering on the show too. Come on, guys. Drama is not talking softly. Come on. Drama is carrying the story. comedy and drama related. Yeah. So, yeah, they're not doing a political thriller. They're just not doing that. That would be a very, very bad idea on both sides of the fence. It's that, oh, both sides are involved. No, that's not it. It's that they would have to skirt all the other issues. See, the reason Deep Space Nine worked with this, they had political allegory in there, is the Cardassians are basically space Nazis, and the Ferengi are basically us Americans, and in the studio, and the Bajorans are basically Palestine, pretty much. I'll probably get flagged by YouTube for even mentioning the word, but that's what it was. It was Palestine. It totally was. That's what they were doing. That's obvious what they were doing. But yes, yeah, the Romulans were sort of like Cold War era sneaky sort of pseudo Russians, and obviously the Klingons were originally Chinese, but then they became Russian Viking guys in the Next Generation. But they clearly were metaphors for other political groups. So how would you do, let's stay in that, because how would you do a political story with President Archer? It would be boring. He's, and as Mark's Cards pointed out last night, a discussion of this, he's George Bush Sr. in the Enterprise. He's not Bush Jr. Bush Jr. would be a mess. Bush Sr. Yeah, his character is sort of a Bush allegory already, so... but that's still not good. So yeah, if there was a Kal Kat political Star Trek, and there wouldn't be, the bad guy would clearly have sort of be kind of a fat guy, orange with a giant bouffant hairdo, and he'd clearly have a New York accent, and he'd had a casino on the Ferengi planet. It would really be obvious who that is, and then they would make fun of him for the entire episode for having bankrupted his casino. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I would go there. Yeah, absolutely. And the LGBT characters would be furries, and they would also save the galaxy at the same time. So, yeah, fan films are clearly infinite diversity and infinite combinations. But yes, as I also commented on there, which was originally the IDIC symbol thing, was supposed to be like a trinket toy originally that Petrie Trimble and the others thought of the classic Trek, and they're like, oh, this would be cool if you had this toy, DC Fontana in them as well. Back in the day, the classic Trek. And it was going to be this little medallion. You could own the Spock Vulcan medallion. It was a product placement for their toy. I don't own one, but it'd be kind of cool. Anyways, but yeah, it's a little medallion thing. That's all it was. But yeah, the idea of infinite diversity and infinite Star Trek as for the other mentions the Doomcock critical drinker and the other guy as well, the other naysayers as well, just to mention them. She does, and it's like those guys don't watch Star Trek anyway. So like the Star Wars haters don't watch Star Wars either. I mean, there's been some bad Star Wars too, but it's like just the writing. It has nothing to do with being woke. Star Trek has always been woke. Woke means diverse. Diversity. Be nice to people. That's what it means. Be nice to people that are different than you. That's what it means. But it has come to be a pejorative in certain political circles, and it shouldn't be. Star Trek has always been woke. Star Trek has had a diverse cast, going back to the original. But for some reason they've been they didn't have an official gay character until 2017 on Discovery, really, which is like, what? I've waited a long time for that. And then they kill him off and they bring him back. It was Culber and Stamets, yeah. And then they introduced the other two to try and fix it. Lou DeBarrio's character and the other one. Ian Alexander, Blue DeBarrio, who aren't actually teenagers; they're in their early 20s. But anyway, they were playing teenagers, and that's common in Hollywood. Yeah, they do. Anyway, so there is my rant on the update, saying it's still debunked a week later. So there you go.